originally I'm from southeast Pennsylvania, about 54 miles outside of Philadelphia, from Bucks County. And so I was really influenced by the bucolic landscape of that part of Pennsylvania. I mean, I think one of the things I think about is that the British were sort of overcome by the landscape as much as the soldiers during the Revolutionary War. It's very dense forest and so on. Anyway, so I went to school at Philadelphia College of Art. I took classes, liberal arts classes at Penn. And then I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for my graduate degree. Worked as an artist for many years in Chicago, showed in Chicago, and then came down here to teach at ISU. And then I taught at ISU, I've taught at Wesleyan and Heartland. And now I'm retired from teaching, which I'm delighted about. But I enjoyed my students, I miss the students, but I don't really miss all the prep work for teaching.
So, as an artist, what did your work start off as, and how has it changed?
Boy, that's a difference. My work, actually, I worked for a long time figuratively. So my work was really based on observation and working from observation. And the work, I started becoming, I just was done saying what I had to say in that way. My work was really about narrative figuration, figures in environments, and I just got done. I just was done. So by the time I came down here, the figures were becoming still a part of it, but the backgrounds and things were becoming more and more abstract, basically. And then eventually the work just I decided to focus on what did I like in the paintings, and that was the color of the skin. So I started doing like the paintings became like almost indexical. They became like, little skin samples and patterns and things like that. And it eventually just slowly morphed into more abstraction. But I've always thought of even figurative work, even representational, observational work, as fundamentally abstract. So for me, it wasn't that big of a switch into doing something different. And now the work is, I use the word abstract, but it's still based in representation, except I'm dealing with place, and place in my mind is really this idea of, where the concept of memory comes into, and it takes place with time. So memory and time become place. And like a landscape can change dramatically, but the place it is at does not. So that's where sort of my reference material is for my work.
Can you talk about your use of color?
I'm really interested in color. I think that's maybe one of the driving forces in my work for sure. My next door neighbor in Chicago started working, doing restoration work, and she had all these color charts she had to learn. She graduated from Yale as a painter, but the color charts were interesting in that when I went to art school, a lot of it's based on Albert's color theory. And I had 3 semesters of color theory. We had comprehensive. Philadelphia College of Art was very comprehensive, grinding paint, everything. But these color charts were interesting to me because suddenly you weren't reducing color with its complement to make a gray. You were reducing it within its color temperature. And then the paintings, like the early paintings, the Renaissance paintings and things, they're based on actually balancing colors opposite each other. It's not making this gray with just some chromatic color forward, which is maybe more color theory than anybody wants to hear right now. But anyway, I'm very interested in color theory. I'm very interested in how the colors work. I think a lot about color temperature. I think a lot about balancing within the composition. So I'm really interested, and I think that actually comes from me. I was raised Catholic. I went to parochial school. I'm used to all that iconography, and that kind of thinking about colors actually related to the iconography in, Raphael or Michelangelo or or Botticelli or any of those kind of early Renaissance painters, where they balance things inside the composition, not necessarily made grays. And I'm not I'm not dissing Grays at all, but it really fascinated me. I was really interested in that a lot.
But drawing is central to what you do as well.
Yes. I draw all the time. I draw all the time. And sometimes the drawings, I have comprehensive sketchbooks. And my work a lot of times is still figurative in them, but they're still from memory a lot of the times. I have some sketchbooks that are only shapes. I have other sketchbooks that are like, sort of almost like cartoon characters in a sense. It's anything comes off the top of my mind. So I'm always drawing because I think that it's important to keep the imagination really fertile and active so that when you do go into the studio, you have something to draw from. You're not empty inside in a way, in terms of your visual vocabulary.
Nice. So, what would you like the viewers to experience when they see your work?
I would hope that they would just draw their own conclusions. I want them to, I don't want to prescribe that they should walk away from. And I think maybe that is why maybe I walked a little bit further away from observational work to begin with. I really wanted a different interaction with the viewer in that way. And I'm interested in cross currents in art. So for example, and this might be helpful for the viewer in terms of interpreting the work, a thread in fiber reminds me of a plowed field. So when I look at something, I'm always looking at other, when I'm looking at a place, I'm always looking at something else. A drive to Peoria, I might spend all my time looking at how all the farmers end their, when they come to the end of a row, and how wide they sweep, or how narrow they sweep, or what they do, what happens when they hit a gully. And I'm interested in those kind of marks, but I'll interpret them totally differently. I don't want to interpret them so literally. And I'm hoping that when people look at them, it'll be like, gee, that kind of reminds me of shadows that my arbor throws in late afternoon. Or this little part maybe reminds me of a gravel walkway in some garden I visited somewhere. I mean, I'm much more interested in people experiencing the work in that way.
Nice. So you began our conversation talking about the terrain of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
How does the terrain of central Illinois, with its glacial flatness?
It was shocking to me. Illinois just almost flipped me out. I just was like, well, first of all, you have to realize I went from Pennsylvania to Chicago, and that wasn't too bad because my family, we always had a second house at the Jersey Shore. So, I was used to, being near water and being flatter near water. And, and Michigan, by the way, has a very similar topography to New Jersey. The sandy soil, even though the lake is different than the ocean, but the flatness of Illinois just, I also couldn't figure out what the farmers were doing, because in Pennsylvania, all the hedgerows are another crop. Currants, hazelnuts, do you know what I mean? So here there wasn't much of that. It was like, and I really would think about it, like this space, how did it make me feel? How is it different? What could I get out of it in some way? And those are the things that interested me about it. Suddenly it became like this giant silence, which was, I think, I really liked a lot.
Well, let's talk about that silence and the idea of space and how we exist in space and we build metaphor through space.
Mm-hmm.
So your work allows, I always feel your work allows the viewer to be contemplative as they explore the interactions in the space and the color dynamics.
Yeah, I would agree. I also had extensive music training. So when I was studying at Philadelphia College of Art, I was also studying performance piano at the Philadelphia Musical Academy across the street. And so a lot of my work, not that it's musical, but I am interested in the fact that music has an emotional response with the person who's listening. And I really like the idea. So when I'm looking at the work and I am thinking about what are the dynamics of this piece, what is the meter, what is the tempo, what is the sort of the emotional pitch. I don't think about melody so much. I don't think about words. In fact, in my own studio, I'll listen to maybe opera, but it has to be in another language. Or I listen to a lot of African music. I don't want to hear words. I really want to just experience, how the uniqueness of the sounds and how they work together. And so, yeah, I do think about silence, because, there is no music without silence. Between the beats, it's that silence that makes the rhythmic component. So, I do think about those things a lot when I'm working.
Do you have favorite composers?
Probably I'd have to say Chopin, because I love playing it and it's so difficult and beautiful. I'm always sort of like amazed at how beautiful it is and how mournful. He was dying his whole life, basically. And he knew it, and I really thank George Sand for taking care of him, or we wouldn't have most of that music.
I've read that Chopin never played a piece of his the same way twice.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I don't see how you can play it the same way twice. A lot of times if I'm working on a new piece, I'll look at all the different pianists who are playing that piece and see how they're playing it. And I do the same thing with some Bach work too, because not everybody, it's prescribed, but it's not prescribed in stone. And so you'll listen to one piece and they'll be playing it like faster and a little bit zippier. Somebody else will be playing it slower. I like the way they interpret things. There's also different interpretations for different ways you might do the pedaling, for example, that are really, people are sort of pretty dramatic about. Like Seymour Bernstein is really emphatic about how Chopin would really use certain pedal notations and where it was supposed to fall. And that changes everything. It just makes things so different.
Yeah. So, you're married to an artist.
Yes.
What's the dialogue that occurs between two working artists?
I think the important thing, now this is like somebody, like giving tips to young people that might be starting out, don't get competitive. The relationship you have with your career has nothing to do with any other artist in the world. And I think, and I would say even like going off, you're leaving home, you're going off to Chicago or Paris or New York or San Francisco or LA or whatever, don't think about competing with other people in that way. Yeah, maybe you can use their cruise as inspiration, but don't get into, he got this or she got that. It's not about that. It's about how you work with the world in some way. But we do get a lot of feedback. We try to keep it you're always going to ask them what they think of something, and he's a very different artist than me in some ways. So, it's I'll have him to my studio, but also I have a friend of mine who's a non-artist to my studio, because I'm really interested in how they're getting the emotional pitch of something. I'll say, okay, look at it this way. What do you think? Okay, now I'm going to turn it this way. Now, does that feel fuller or emptier to you? Does that, so, I can ask him those questions, and I really have faith that I'm getting a good answer. I'm not being sort of patronized or anything like that. And we both have a broad level of interests too. Makes it interesting.
It does. It's often helpful for me to have people, to get the response from people that aren't trained.
Oh yeah, it's very interesting. I know when I was showing the figurative work, I remember I was doing these narrative paintings, and they would come up to me and say things like, now, why is that red there? Or why is that figure doing this or that? And I'd be like, oh. And a lot of times it would be some deficit actually in mine that I hadn't considered. But it was so interesting. I'd be like, oh, that's a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah, nice.
Well, you've heard my comments to your work on Facebook. It's like, stop now.
Yeah.
I love Fairfield Porter.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Milton Avery. So, a lot of times, like you have, like you'll be like hitting some like note for me,
Yeah.
and I'll be like, oh my God, please don't touch it. But I understand that for you, you have a different idea about completion than I do. So
Yeah, as much. I mean, I love Avery and Porter, but
they're not who you're looking at.
well,
thinking about it.
I look at them a hell of a lot.
Oh, do you?
I do.
Surprises
Oh
me.
yeah, yeah. But there's a lot of artists that look at them, and the marketplace is crowded with people that do it badly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and I find that the people that know when it works and know when it doesn't work are few and far between.
Oh, interesting.
So if I stop where I've completed that set of problems,
Uh-huh.
me and 7 other people will know it.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. And so I take it further, because otherwise I will have hollowed out my marketplace.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I understand that I understand about the marketplace because
Yeah.
a lot of, especially people who don't really, I don't know, I won't say it, they have a different requirement for landscape,
Yeah.
and I mean, I like Avery and Porter because I'm interested in their abstraction and color
Oh yeah.
and the kind of shapes they're making and the relationship to them and how that speaks to me. And sometimes you hit it so great at the beginning. Oh my God, I'll be like looking at something like, oh, that's so beautiful.
Oh yeah. And I love that stuff too. I mean,
Yeah, but you are right though. You do have a different audience and they do want something different from you. And also maybe you might also feel the need to do that. You know, to tell the story a little more. Mm-hmm. You know.
yeah. But the bones for my work start with. I was just looking at a landscape this weekend. We were in Indiana looking at a landscape this weekend, and I thought, man, that's Avery all over it. And or Lois Dodds or
It's low stones,
yeah, or Hopper with his embracing those notes of abstraction. It's ultimately, I think, as I carve out time in the studio again, I think I'll do a whole series of smaller notations of those
okay.
kind of color things. That
Boy, you should have a show of that.
yeah. But when I was with, they pushed me just.
Oh.
I was at that point in my life, I had a mortgage and
Oh, yeah.
daycare.
And he could sell work.
Oh, he sold the hell out of my
Oh
stuff.
my God, he sold tons of
I was making,
a long time ago.
oh yeah. And that really pushed me to do bigger and bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
And I got comfortable with the athleticism of painting with my shoulders and
Oh
my
yeah,
feet.
your whole arm. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and I've had enough shows in the last 10 years where I've kept that going. But in my head, I want to play with some smaller notation things and see where that takes me. Anyway.
I think it's important to go inside tracks.
Yeah.
I think that's why I do my sketchbooks at night. I mean, I'm probably never going to even show them to people. They're like, almost like comic book things. I mean, it's just, I watch TV and like I'll very quickly like sketch somebody or something. It's not really, it's serious, but it's not serious.
Yeah, well, it's
I
play.
think this is probably more serious.
Yeah.
Play is super important.
Play is incredibly serious.
Super serious. Well,
Yeah.
you've had kids. How do your kids learn something? They play.
Yeah.
They play, they experiment, they figure out what are my limitations, what's going on with this.
Yeah.
They really, that's so important.
Yeah, it gives you your armatures of understanding.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share?
No, I just hope people enjoy the show. I hope they let their imaginations run wild as they look at the work. I guess that's all I have to say.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.